Well, everybody, it's time to pick the bracket, time to pick your field of 64. Not to brag, but to brag, last year I did win this thing in my bracket challenge group, so hopefully it's actually going to matter for this season. It won't. But we're going to get started, and going to the East and the West, the Midwest and the South, I'm just going to pick all the one seeds. Matter of fact, I'm also going to pick all the two seeds. Sorry, but not sorry. I think with all those teams, one and two seeds, just such a heavy favorite over those seeds that it's just going to be really, really asking a lot for any of those teams to pull out the upset. And I'm just going to automatically move them on, just not waste anybody's time. Get started early. I guess we're going to have a little bit of debate about a 3 and a 4 team, but I don't like those matchups either for any of those teams. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pick all those three seeds right off the gate, guys. I think here's my thinking with all those picks already going through is that in a lot of March Madness today, a lot of these teams that are those group of 5 teams, you're looking to pull off those upsets, maybe win 1, 2, or 3 games. It's like a lot of those good players that lead the charge get plucked and go to the power 4, I guess you can call it now. Those teams with the NIL backing, so that transfer portal chaos kind of does ruin a little bit of the Cinderella story, and so I think we do have more chalk brackets nowadays. So just starting it out with that opinion and what we've got there, but moving on to some of the closer games and where you can make an argument. Ohio State TCU should be one of the best of the round of 64. I'll go with the Buckeyes winning there in the East to play Duke. I think they just get the Horned Frogs by maybe a 3-pointer. St. John's in northern Iowa. Of course, the Panthers had a great story to win their conference tournament. But I think ultimately St. John's, the Red Storms, are a really good team under Rick Pitino. They're probably not going to win the national title this year, but it's like they have maybe a chance moving forward. If they keep building like this, they'll probably get one. Kansas and Cal Baptist, another team that gets its first appearance in Cal Baptist, but I go with Kansas even though they have got plenty of things going on and discussions that really have nothing to do with the performance of the team going into this tournament. But Louisville and South Florida, I think the Cardinals are a really good, underrated, almost sleeper team. It's one of those teams that if there is going to be some upsets here, they could pull them off and get all the way to me into the Final Four if things go right. Of course, that's not going to be easy, but they really could win a lot of those games. UCLA and UCF, I do like the Bruins by a few baskets actually against the Knights. I think it's just a better Big Ten conference, and they played in there. They've always been a good basketball school, so I'm going to have to take them over the Knights. Going towards the West here, obviously pick Arizona, but I do like Utah State over Villanova. I guess by seeding you can call that an upset, but I think the Aggies are a slightly better team than Villanova, and Wisconsin over High Point to me is just kind of a default. Like I said, I think the Cinderella story is not as much there. Then I have to take Arkansas over Hawaii for that case, and I do like BYU versus either Texas or NC State, which gets decided tonight. I think both those teams are pretty far down in their conference in Texas and NC State. I know BYU playing in probably maybe a weaker Big 12, I guess, but like they've been kind of fading at the end of the season, so you could make an argument for Texas or NC State getting that extra game too, getting a little more tune-up for this, but I still go with BYU. Probably one of the better games of the first round. Miami and Missouri, I'm going to take the Hurricanes there. Obviously the bias, but I got to take them by a basket. I think that's maybe what they're better by, but it really could go either way. And then same with Missouri. I think they do have almost a home court advantage being in St. Louis, so you could really argue that. But there will be multiple games played there at the same day, so it's like it's still got that neutral site feel to it. Going downwards towards the South, I do like Iowa to beat Clemson and take down the Tigers. Going to be a fun one there between these 8-9 seeds. But I think they're a little bit better than the Tigers, even though they did not get the seeding. Same with Vanderbilt over McNeese. Really good, story that they have going on with the student manager. That was obviously fun when they had an upset, a few years ago, and everything that went into that. But Vanderbilt, to me, is playing really good basketball. In fact, they beat that Florida team that's a 1 seed in the SEC tournament by a lot. So you do have to like what the Commodores are doing this time of the year. Nebraska, I think much better than Troy. They take them down easily. This is a game where it's really ticky-tacky, and I think North Carolina is a little overseeded, but I still will take them over VCU. As a 6 seed, the Rams have been always a decent basketball program. Better yet, though, for them, is that North Carolina is struggling with injuries to this point in the year, and they haven't really played that well up to their standards, in my opinion, but I still think they're winning that one by a basket or two, and they'll move on to play Illinois. In the St. Mary's and Texas A&M game, I got to go with the Gales. I believe they're better than Texas A&M, even though Aggies another big SEC bid towards the later half of the conference. Although I will take a Kentucky team in the Midwest over Santa Clara and the Broncos. That's another game you could see an upset with the Broncos, but I do believe Kentucky is a little better. Tennessee over Miami of Ohio or SMU. I think both those teams have a little bit of a story. Also, I think it was good to get the Red Hawks in. I mean, I know some people are saying they're technically not even like one of the better teams in the field of 64. But, to me, when you're not going to probably win it all anyways, and you would be one of those later seeds, like you're an 11 or 12, just get put in anyways, because it's like, what's really the crime for the team that doesn't get put in or gets put in instead? It's like they're going to both probably lose before the national title, so you might as well put in the good story. That's the way I think of it, I guess, for March Madness, given what this is supposed to be. But Alabama, I think, beats Hofstra. Texas Tech over Akron. Not too much analysis with that, but they're both the much better teams. Georgia and St. Louis, this is one where I think a month ago, maybe I'm picking the Billikens, but the Bulldogs, I think, a little bit better than St. Louis right now. But this is a really close call because both these teams didn't play as well towards the end of the season. But I guess I'll take Georgia in that one. That should be a really good game, as it's expected to be with those seedings. But going upwards, we'll start back in the East for the round of 32. I think Duke is going to beat Ohio State soundly. This team, if they get rolling downhill, I think it's just really hard to stop them. They've got so many different weapons. Now, there's some injuries for Duke, and that's the concern going into this tournament. In fact, that's probably the only thing that could take them down, is kind of that phenomenon. But I still think the Buckeyes just aren't at that level. St. John's against Kansas, they could definitely beat Kansas, and I believe they do. Kansas obviously has its own story with one of the players in its lineup not even really playing half the time, or he's scheduled to be a great pick, and it's a lot of weird stuff going on with the Jayhawks. I think St. John's, despite being a 5 seed, is a better team. They'll probably be favored and then win that game. Louisville and Michigan State, I'm going to take the Spartans over Louisville. I know I just praised Louisville for all that stuff, and they could win this game. But I got to pick the way I think I likely see it breaking down, so I'm going to take Michigan State. UConn, though, does beat UCLA. That's another team that, like Louisville, I think can make a decent run, but I'm going to take the Huskies. They have so much experience here in March that they probably win. Arizona over Utah State, back over to the West. I have to take the Wildcats. They're really good. They've been beating a lot of teams by margin, so they probably do take down Utah State by probably double digits. In the Wisconsin and Arkansas game, this is one where I got to go to my notes. I'm going to take Arkansas. I think they're, with those extra games in the SEC tournament, probably earlier on in the year, maybe you're leaning Wisconsin, but they have really come on in this March, and that's where you want to be hot, so I think they do beat Wisconsin to play Arizona. BYU and Gonzaga, I do believe the Zags take down BYU, which is a team that really not trending as well going into this tournament, and there's some injury concerns, but we'll take Gonzaga either way. Purdue and Miami, I do like the Canes, obviously, being an alum, but, this team with Miami, I think that their issue is that they do beat everybody that they should beat, but then playing a lot of these higher teams, they do lose, which is, what should happen. They're still building, but that's just where it is. I mean, they do have a couple of upsets, but for the most part, it's like, again, they win the games they're favored and lose the games they're underdogs. Isn't really a lot of playing down or playing up, I guess. That's what I've noticed anyways, but we'll see what happens. Now, Michigan and Georgia, I'm going to take Wolverines over the Bulldogs, and obviously a 1 seed. Just hard to really disagree with them being better than the Bulldogs. Going down to Alabama, Texas Tech, I guess I like the Tide over the Red Raiders, but that should be one of the closer games, and I think a great contest, but that sets up Alabama getting to the Sweet 16, which I feel like Bama's been there a lot over the last few years. They don't always get past that, but they do tend to win a game or two in the tournament a lot. And Tennessee and Virginia, I'm going to take the Cavs over the Volunteers, and that'll be a win for the ACC if they're counting it in this tournament. But I think they're slightly better than Tennessee and win by a few baskets. Same with Iowa State, who's been consistent. This is probably I don't know, maybe even most controversial team for people going into this tournament, because I feel like they're the one team that a lot of people aren't picking to win it all, but they're like definitely have the potential, and they're a 2 seed, and who knows, maybe they don't have the wherewithal of a Houston or something where they've got all those tournament runs in years past. I don't know. But going over to the South, Florida, I think beats Iowa, and the Hawkeyes, a good team, but the Gators just won it all last year, so I got to take them. Vanderbilt, I think, stays hot off the SEC tournament run. They beat not only Nebraska but McNeese to play Florida again, which will be a good game. Now, North Carolina, Illinois, I was already talking. I don't even know if North Carolina wins in the first round, but I'm going to take Illinois, definitely beating them in the second round with that offense. I think North Carolina can't keep up. And speaking of, though, defensively, Houston does beat St. Mary's. They've got so much experience in these spots in their tournament history. I think they're also a team, probably a team furthest down in a lot of ratings, that could win the national championship as a 2 seed, so, or realistically anyway, so I'll take them beating St. Mary's. And I also think they beat Illinois starting out our Sweet 16. I think, Illinois, again, defensively, not enough troops to this tournament to me, and I think that's going to be their Achilles heel. I will take Iowa State, though, beating Virginia in what should be a good game. And, that's another game where it's probably go either way, decided by a basket or two, but I think Iowa State deserves the nod, and they get that win. Florida and Michigan, I like both these 1 seeds to advance. Just think that they've been playing really well. Now, that Florida-Vanderbilt game, as we know, Vanderbilt obviously getting a win against Florida recently, but I think the Gators going into the tournament here, they already knew in that SEC tournament they would be a really good position for March Madness. So I think they do win that game against Vanderbilt, which Vanderbilt needed to maybe perform better at the end of the season to be a higher seed. But in the rematch, I think they win. Going back up here to the top in the East and West, I think Duke and Arizona both win. That's going to be a St. John's team that maybe to that point, if they roll against Kansas and they roll against California Baptist, they could beat Duke, but that's going to require a lot of stops against the Blue Devils, and I just think, especially getting deeper into this tournament where Duke's getting a little bit healthier, they're going to be too much. Now, in this Michigan State and UConn game, probably the most uncomfortable pick of the tournament for me, but I think the Huskies barely beat Michigan State. I mean, that's a go either way. Again, coin flip as we get to this time of the tournament, but I think UConn, with its experience, Dan Hurley obviously leading this crew, they win that game. And then Purdue and Gonzaga, another one that's a tough one, but I will take the Boilermakers. So in this round down south, Houston playing Florida in the Elite Eight, I'm going to take Houston to get a rematch win over Florida. And I just think it's going to be a really good game, but the Cougars pull it out there to get back to the Final Four. I also like Michigan to beat Iowa State, and the Wolverines have just proven to be blowing out so many great teams this year. It's just hard to disagree that they are one of the best teams in the country. Going up here to the other one in 2 matchups, I think Duke gets UConn, and I believe this is the best team in the country, but Arizona also beats Purdue, and the Boilermakers lose by maybe a 3-pointer there, and we get to the Final Four in Indianapolis, where I've got Duke playing Houston, Arizona playing Michigan, and I got to go with the Blue Devils over the Cougars. It feels like a million times where Houston gets to this situation and they end up losing the game. Plus, I feel like legitimately they are a worse team than Duke this time around, whereas even in those years past, they've been a better team than their opponent and still lose later on in the tournament. Now, Arizona, Michigan, I think by the time the Wildcats get to the Final Four, they'll be juiced up enough to beat the Wolverines, who are probably better than them going into this tournament. In the national championship, I'm going to take Duke. And for the points scored, I'll go with 148. That should be something realistic. Like a 70s-something game where Duke wins by a basket. But that's my March Madness field of 64, filled into completion. It should be, to me, another kind of chalk tournament. Obviously, last year I won the thing, picking all the 1 seeds to get to the Final Four, and Florida beating Houston and whatnot. But I don't know. I mean, I just feel like our age of Cinderellas is a little bit less because, again, the transfer portal has kind of taken and shifted things around where those players that lead those group of five teams often leave to get more money at the other schools. And it's just hard to be in the group of five and kind of work your way through the bracket, I think, now because of a lot of those conditions. Not that you can't, not that there aren't good schools doing it. Let's take a look at UConn in there. I mean, obviously St. John's is now, getting to go, and they're rebuilding their program. But you do need to succeed in basketball now. You got to have NIL. You got to have backing like that, and also good school history, recruiting, whatnot. And a lot of these teams that I'm picking to get through this bracket do have that. So that's why I'm taking Duke as obviously a pretty blue blood team to win the national title. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And as always, keep it classy. We'll see you next time.